Welcome back to Your Art is a Spell. Today, I am thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Eli, known widely as the Gender Doula. Eli is a visionary in non-clinical, full-spectrum transition care, holding a PhD focused on transgender medicine and history alongside formal doula training. In this episode, we dive deep into his practice, unpack what it truly means to hold sacred space as a gender doula, and explore how people can use gender exploration as an expansive liberatory tool. Plus, Eli joins us with an exciting announcement you will not want to miss. Settle in, open your hearts, and let's get into the magic. Well, I am so happy today to have Eli, the Gender Doula, on the Your Art is a Spell podcast. It is such a gift and an honor for you to join us today and to be sharing about some incredible news that you have to share with us. But before we get into that, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are, and also if you want to share what being a gender doula means for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here. It's always so lovely to talk to you. And so I'm Eli. I am the gender doula. That's my sort of professional persona, name, and business, I guess, also. And in terms of what being a gender doula is, I've been doing this work since January of 2020. So just under 7 years. And part of the challenge of this work is that I was sort of simultaneously tasked with doing this work while also explaining to people what it was. Because before I started doing it, there really wasn't anyone who was calling themselves a gender doula. And so a gender doula, at least the way that I have defined it and practice it, is a person who supports folks through questioning, exploring, or transitioning their gender. And also, I support family members, loved ones, lovers, and also just people who are curious or interested in gender and maybe don't even necessarily want to transition or change anything, but they maybe sense that there are ways that they could express their gender that would be even more authentic. And so I work with everyone and I provide a full spectrum type of support for all these different needs and life states. And that's the practice that I've developed for myself.
It sounds radically inclusive and so open and so needed too, because I know so many people in general like question gender, and especially living within the society that we live in that has such prescribed rigid gender norms. It makes so much sense that there is a space that is so needed where we can have these types of conversations. And I'm curious, like, how do you work with folks? Is it like one-on-one? Do you work with couples? Like how does it look like when folks connect with you and work with you?
That's a really good question. I do work with folks one-on-one. Sometimes folks will have their parents or partners come and have a session with me. Sometimes that's a session where we're all meeting together. Sometimes it's a session where I'm just meeting with the loved one. I also do workshops and classes. I have a breathwork circle that I do every month. And I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm missing. Well, I also have evergreen resources that folks can download. And I have a newsletter. And in my newsletter, once a month, I do a feature called Ask the Gender Doula. And so anybody can submit a question and I answer usually 4 or 5 questions a month on whatever topics people have questions about. And so that's another way that I support folks and offer resources.
Wonderful. I'm wondering if it feels okay to share a little bit about your own journey with gender and how you ended up deciding that this is like a role that you wanted to inhabit and support other folks around.
Totally. Yeah, it was very unexpected. So my background is actually in academia. Before even academia, I was sort of in the world of wage work and, I did all kinds of like retail and just kind of scrapping and try to get by. And at some point I decided I was going to try to go back to school. And at the time I was very embroiled in my own gender exploration. And it was not going well. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I had a lot of just really challenging trauma background and things like that. And I've always been a person who does well in school. That skill set has always worked for me. And so I went back to school and I decided that if I couldn't figure out this gender thing, I might as well like learn about it. And, like on the one hand, you can learn all day about gender theory and gender everything, and it will not teach you about your gender.
Right.
And so that is a thing that I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
But I did learn a lot, and so I went back to school. I got my degree in gender studies and LGBT studies at UCLA. And I had this sort of lifelong dream that I wanted to become a professor. And so I really excelled in my undergraduate, and I decided to go to grad school. And I went to Berkeley to get my PhD in jurisprudence and social policy, which is the interdisciplinary study of law. And my main research was about trans legal and medical history and like sort of policy. And so by this time I had transitioned medically and legally, and I was, I understood my gender a lot better, but I kind of had this notion of myself as like, I'm going to do research. I'm going to generate research that really helps create better policy for trans people. My goal was then, and actually is the same now, which is to make the world a better place for trans people. But because I had this skill set that was very well suited to academics, I figured that my way of making the world a better place for trans people was to be a really good academic. But when I got to grad school and I sort of it's that moment where you're sort of learning how the sausage gets made, And
yes.
grad school was very traumatizing, and it was really, really hard on me. And I was also having some very, very serious health issues because of how hard I had pushed my body as an undergraduate. And so as my body is kind of shutting down and I'm going through this incredibly traumatic experience, I started to seek different types of healing modalities. And during that time, I heard a podcast with my tarot teacher, and she was talking to a birth doula named Erica Livingston. And Erica was like, I believe that we need a doula for every threshold of life. And so that's when I had this thunderclap moment of oh my God, we need gender doulas. But I was applying to law school. I was getting my PhD. I was completely overwhelmed. And I was like, that great idea for not me to do. Right. And yet, as I waited for my law school acceptance, as I toiled away at my second year PhD, I just kept getting this message over and over again about gender doulas. And it took me most of a year before I finally was like, oh my God, I think that this is a calling. And when I felt like that was confirmed to me, I pivoted very quickly and I don't know, I know from the outside, it seemed very, very fast that all of a sudden I went from being I'm going to be a professor to I'm leaving academia, I'm going to be a gender doula. From the inside, it was months and months and months of very intense suffering to get from one point to the next. But when I did make that choice, I determined how I wanted to sort of exit one sphere and enter the other. So I did finish my PhD. And while I wrote my dissertation, I was starting my business. But all that was happening in the context of 2020. So in January 2020, by that point, I was already doing my first round of mentorship with the birth doulas so I could learn the doula skills because I had all this academic knowledge, but I didn't have the doula skill set. So I was doing my mentorship for that. I had anticipated that my practice would be completely in person, very local to Los Angeles. And then the first person who contacted me for services lived across the country. And I was like, oh no, I don't have anyone to send this person to, because at that time, there was one other person I knew of who was doing this work, and they didn't live close to this person either. So I pivoted to doing a more virtual experience, and I started building that out. And then 2 months later, the world shut down. And I was very grateful that I'd already started thinking that way. So that was kind of the origin story of the Gender Doula.
Wow. Thank you so much, Eli, for sharing all that. I'm just really moved by how you had that moment of, things coming together, you hearing this message around the need for support around thresholds, and you really hearing that as maybe as the beginning of a calling, right? And yet I could definitely understand why it took so long for you to get to the place where you could leave this well-worn academic path to stepping into a path of the unknown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, really, as you said, you maybe know one other gender doula that exists. And this calling, yeah, it definitely brings up, what a lot of folks that I know listen to this podcast contend with, which is sometimes our calling does mean that we have to forge something into existence, or we have to imagine something that is not there. And I really do feel like in some ways, like that is where I see the intersection of like magic and art, of kind of being creative and being able to use that imagination or that vision to feel something into existence before it's even there. And so I just want to reflect that back and commend you for that courage. I know it wasn't easy, as you said, but to be able to do that and to follow something before it was even an idea or before it was even concrete, and then to realize that you were going to be able to show up to support so many folks, because I see the work that you do and how many people that you help through the many ways that you show up virtually and in person as well. It's incredible.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's truly such a beautiful, brilliant, fascinating honor to do the work that I do. And, it's been very interesting to build this because again, it's really been from the ground up. I've known several people who've done similar work, people who call themselves gender doulas. And of course, it's like each of us is doing our version of it because there's no standard, which is fine. Like we're building something new. But I will say, actually, just before we recorded this, I had my first class with my inaugural cohort of gender doulas that I am training. And so I'm very excited about that. In about a year, we'll have a little crop of new gender doulas, and I'm very excited about that.
Oh my gosh, that is so heartwarming to hear. And I think one of the many things I love about you and your practice is that you bring such a holistic, joyful, caring, inclusive energy to this work. And, I heard you were saying earlier that you had studied law and were thinking about like the medical system. And I just have been really struck by how much you don't talk about that in the work that you do. So much of your work is around like spirituality and meaning making and like happiness. I feel like that to me is bringing such a different message than what we normally hear within mainstream media around transitions or how folks navigate gender.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that I'm sure that for most people, each person has to have their own journey with this. But I think that if folks could look at my journey and learn from it, that would be awesome. Because for me, I really went about as hard as a person can go into understanding legal and medical transition. I literally have a PhD.
Right.
So I spent like 15 years researching this, and like really digging and digging and digging to try to understand why these systems are the way that they are. Because there was like a naive version of me that believed that the way that we manage medical transition, the way that we approach legal transition, that those things were that way for a reason, maybe even a reasonable reason. Like, I don't know if I ever believed it was for a good reason per se, but like a reasonable, I was like, okay, surely this stuff is all based on something reasonable. The thing is, the more you look at it, the less you could convince yourself of that. And what it boils down to, like, I really like went hard on understanding at least the current Western model of transness as like sort of a medical or legal situation, right? Because there's many other cultures and models and things like that, right? And so, but I am a white person from the United States, so-called United States, and that is the context that I have been steeped in. So that's the context that I studied. And what I came to understand was that there's this history based in, to put it very, very simply and quickly, cis men, usually cishet men's understanding of what gender differences were and gender expansiveness, all of that sort of like locked and loaded into a medical model and then spat back to us as a set of standards that we had to adhere to in order to receive care. And that's the whole foundation of it. And so I was like, oh, this sucks. And it's not based on anything reasonable.
Right. There's like no intention behind it. It's actually like really limiting and ignorant.
Exactly. It's not based on our real lives at all. It's based on a misunderstanding of us, then being filtered back through us and then filtered back from us to them, right? Because the medical providers would say, this is what it means to be trans. The trans people would be like, okay, guys, I got the list. This is what we have to tell them to get our hormones. And then they would tell that back to the medical professionals to get their hormones or surgeries or whatever. And then the medical professionals would be like, look how good we are. All of our patients say the same thing. That's our list that we published in a book that obviously they all bought, or like somebody bought a copy and circulated it through the community, right? Like,
Right.
So it just created this echo chamber of us doing what we had to do to survive, which they took to be evidence of their superiority and accuracy. All of it was just silly. So what came to me, or like what I guess what I came to was like, what are we actually doing? Like, if we're exploring our gender, what's actually happening? You know, like what's actually going on? Not somebody else's model, not what we have to do to get our hormones, not the thing I tell the doctor. What's happening within us, between us, among us, right? So my approach being more based in, like, one of the things that I really base a lot of my approach in is desire as a North Star and desire as a threshold, right? So like the threshold for transition is not dysphoria. It's not, I don't want to be in this body. It's not, I don't like this body, or I hate this body, or I'm in the wrong body. It's not that. That's not the threshold. The threshold is I want something else. That's it. And that's true. Dysphoria is present for some, and maybe even for many. I certainly have experienced that, but it isn't the threshold. It's not the standard of what makes someone trans or what motivates transition. Because if we base our life choices on running away from something that feels bad, that can only take us so far. Whereas if we base our choices on moving toward what is resonant, what feels good, where our desire takes us, right? I feel like that just takes us further across every part of life. So when I sort of landed on that and applied it to gender, that's where I generated my approach from. Like, we have to look at, where is my desire leading me? What feels good? What feels resonant? What helps me feel peaceful or authentic or what have you? And so I think that's the reason why my approach is like so different, is just from that journey.
I'm like getting chills just hearing everything you're sharing. It's so profound to, move away from this really limiting system that really lacks imagination, lacks connection to the actual people, the communities that are needing this type of support, and also really limits the ways that folks can relate to themselves, right? And what you're bringing in is so generative, of leaning into desire, into what you want, and into becoming, right? Or into possibility. Like, that is so transformative. And I feel like this leads a little bit into what I'm hoping that we can maybe spend the rest of the podcast talking about, which is the wonderful news that we're going to be sharing about this new project that you're bringing into the world. And I'd love for you to introduce what you're going to be sharing really soon, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to reach for it. This is my book that's
You
coming
have it in
out,
person.
Gender Rituals. Yes, I have my advanced copy.
Oh my gosh.
I'm assuming it'll be out by the time this airs, because it comes out on August 25th, which is just a few days from today.
Yeah.
So this book, Gender Rituals, I have been working on it for a couple of years. This entire book has been so just channeled through the Transcestors. I have always wanted to publish a book, actually several books. I always say I have like 5 or 6 like spinning my head at any given moment. But this book, I really felt like, okay, this is the first book. And part of the thing actually that inspired that is that I wrote a blog post on my website talking about gender rituals. And it was not a complex blog post at all. It was pretty short. And what I noticed was, on my website analytics, every single month, it was the most popular page on my website by far. And I was like, people want this. They're hungry for it. They need it. And I was waffling on whether or not I should try to write the book. And like, I think it was like the day or something that like that morning I've been asking myself, like, should I write this book? An email landed in my inbox from this person being like, hey, I've been meaning to email you for over a year. That like I used your blog post to help my friend design a gender ritual, and it was so impactful and amazing. And I was like, so you've been meaning to send this for over a year, and it lands on the day that I ask is this the book that I need to write? So that's where we started. And I started writing a book proposal, which I'd never done before. This is my first book. I've been published in other people's books, but I haven't written my own. And so, speaking of ritual, I went out to Joshua Tree. I went out with one of my dearest friends in the whole world, Bonnie. We both had writing projects we were working on. And every morning we would have breakfast together. We would spend the day writing. We would eat dinner together. We would sit in the hot tub and watch the sunset, go to bed, rinse and repeat. And in, I think, 4 days, I wrote like a 30,000 word proposal.
Wow.
Just like knocked it out because it just flowed. And that's how this whole book was. It just flowed. Like, don't get me wrong, it was hard work, but it was definitely, the trans sisters were really like pushing this book out through me. And I felt that as I wrote it. And after I finished that proposal, I was kind of like sending it around to people to get edits. And, I wasn't 100% sure what my next move was. And then a trans editor from my publisher reached out to me and was like, hey, I love your work. Do you have anything that you'd be interested in publishing? Wow. And I was like, well, I have this little book proposal. And so I sent it to them, and then they were very interested, and they were like, this is very up our alley. They gave me advice. They helped me polish it. And then sort of late last year, I submitted it for real. Sorry, late 2024. And then anyways, we got it all set up in 2025 for it to come out this month. And so that has been the journey. It was, for publishing, that's very quick.
Yeah.
And, I wrote my heart out, and I'm really proud of it. I got to read the audiobook. So if folks order the audiobook, they'll hear it in my voice, which I'm very proud of. It was my first time doing that as well. So yeah.
Wow. So much magic behind this book.
Yes.
So much synchronicity and so many moments of just getting affirmation and validation from your community and from the universe that this is really meant to exist and be in the world. And curious, what has led you to, aside from it being popular on your blog, like, I'm curious, like, what gender rituals mean for you, or how you would even define a gender ritual for folks who might, be curious about what it means.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So in the book, the way that I've laid it out is that the first half of the book is just all about ritual. And I'm a Taurus, also Capricorn moon and Mars. So I'm very earthy, and I am not a person who will just spit out a concept and then let you figure it out. Like, I'm going to give you a concrete example, that is how I operate. And so in the whole first half of this book is like, what is ritual and how do you do it? And it's just skills. So really the first half of this book, anybody, at all could really benefit from, for sure, because I talk about like, how do you sort of craft a ritual to suit you? How do you, make it timing wise, something that works for you? How do you use these different skills? What's energetic hygiene? Kind of just like a basic overview of like these foundational ritual building skills. And then the second half of the book is just tons and tons of rituals that I've written that I invite people to use as written or to tweak. And, of course, I've given all the instructions on how to do so in the beginning of the book.
Right.
So that's the basic structure. And part of the reason that I set it up that way is because, pretty early on in my journey as a gender doula, I realized that ritual was missing from most people's transitions and that it was really, really vital. And so I think if I'm recalling correctly, where this started for me was my first client who had a lot of anxiety about starting HRT. And I realized that if we put a ritual around starting HRT, it helped them move into that process more smoothly. And so the idea was, if you are scared to start HRT, you can start off by just holding the hormones in your hand and asking your body, is this okay? So there's like a consent ritual that you can do with those hormones. And what happens is, instead of it feeling like this huge scary thing that you're imposing on yourself, it starts to feel like a collaboration, which is what it is, between your agency, your will, and your body, right? And so that was kind of where it started. And then also clients who had anxiety around things like doing shots, if you put a ritual around it, that helps. If you have anxiety around surgery, if you put a ritual around it, that helps. If you are moving into gender transition and you're like, okay, what do I do with all of the me that existed before this moment? That's for ritual, right?
Yeah.
And so there was just endless moments in transition and gender exploration and all of it that were just needed to be held in ritual. Like if doula work is the work of holding someone through a threshold, thresholds are literally for ritual.
Right.
And we as humans, have evolved for that to be how we hold ourselves through these intense moments, but we live in a culture where that's no longer honored or done or no one's trained in that. In like again in modern Western culture, obviously there's many cultures that do have robust rituals for various thresholds. But modern Western culture, especially white folks, just have been completely cut off from that. And, you see the fruit of that all over the place. So I think that understanding that there's all these points where ritual is so needed and so profound, and that we can do that with each other or for ourselves, that really helped me see that this was like a really big need. And then the popularity of the blog post just confirmed it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. This really makes me, connect, what you're sharing around thresholds and the work that you do with folks and, you witnessing the power of ritual to contain and hold and help folks, move into these different stages or phases of their lives. And yeah, I'm just, sitting with how you're offering both a container for individuals and also for people to do this together too. And I'm wondering if you have any reflections or thoughts about like community ritual or, maybe if there's a difference or if you have any thoughts on individual versus doing ritual with others.
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a section in the book where I talk about how to make these types of choices on, do you want a ritual to be just you? Do you want it to be you and one trusted person or a few trusted people? Do you want it to be held by an officiant? Do you want it to be done in community? These are all part of the like, how do you customize, And I think that some of the rituals around gender can feel so tender and so vulnerable that people may not be able to even tolerate having someone else involved other than themselves, whereas other rituals really benefit from being communal. One in particular that comes to mind, there's a ritual in the book, and this is a ritual I've done in person a few times, which is a name or pronoun change ritual. And there's a version of this in the book that's meant to be done alone or like with one other person. But there's a version that's meant to be done in community and preferably with an officiant. And part of that ritual is literally having your guests speak a phrase out loud to you in front of everyone. And the phrase is, I have always appreciated, and then fill in the blank, something about you that they've always appreciated. So I've always appreciated how kind you are to the people that you care about. And I'm looking forward to seeing how your new name carries that into the future, right? So you have this formula. Yeah. And each person personalizes it to them and to their relationship with you. And what this does is it allows you to receive these very specific reflections of yourself from your community. And it allows the people in your community to verbally say your new name out loud in front of everyone. And that combination is so supportive, both to the person who's changing their name, but also to the community, because it's not easy to learn a new way to call someone. You're going to stumble. If you're really used to another name, it's not always simple to switch over.
Right.
But this allows you to have some accountability for that process and practice it and affirm your loved one. And I just think it's such a beautiful way of using the communal aspect to really reinforce the process.
Yeah. And I also see it as a way of like, building this bridge that honors your relationship, your past with this person, and also is honoring this present and future too. And I just really struck and sitting with how sacred this all is and how intentional and precious and how different this feels, with where we are in terms of like mainstream narratives and culture around how trans folks are being talked about or how gender is being talked about. And I'm wondering what your hope is with your book coming out at this very specific moment that we're living in right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think that really, especially as things have ramped up in terms of the backlash over the last few years, the more that's happened, the less I paid attention to it. And so I really decided quite some years back that I don't care what cis people have to say about gender, basically at all. I certainly don't care what they have to say about trans people. And so I just don't pay attention. Like, I know that things are bad. I don't need to read every headline to know that, but I'm here for my people. And so I don't really make content about any of the stuff going on, and I don't really speak to it, because what I make content about and what I speak to is, how do we resource ourselves? How do we bolster ourselves? How do we move through this? Right? Like, that's where my focus remains. And I think that that was a transistor guided orientation towards this current moment. I think it protects me in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But the book coming out exactly when it's coming out, the conclusion of this book, I talk about trans audacity and how the world needs it.
Yeah.
And I talk about how the book only exists because of trans audacity, my audacity to write it, my editor's audacity to solicit it, my publisher's audacity to publish it, despite everything, right? And I think that that's really where I would ground this question, right? Like, what does it mean for this book to come out right now? It's like, if nothing else, and I know this book will do so much more than this, but if nothing else, I hope that the book will support more trans audacity, because trans audacity is how shit gets done.
Right. It's how things continue to thrive and move forward, and how our communities continue to show up for each other. And yeah, wow, I'm really, really, really excited. I'm really happy that your book is going to come out into the world. And this is such a beautiful gift that you're giving to so many people. And I know that this is for trans folks. As you said, that this really, the work that you do is really geared towards the trans community. And I'm very keenly aware of how much cis people, gender nonconforming people, gender expansive people really can also use these tools and this type of reflection and support as well, knowing that so many of us have different narratives or noise or pain or things that we could explore around gender too.
Absolutely. The first line of the book is, if you're reading this, it was meant for you. And that is always true with my work. I'm consistently shocked by how many people that I wouldn't assume need any sort of support with their gender come to me and say, I need support with my gender. And so now I've just come to understand it. Like, no label is going to tell you whether or not you need support with gender exploration. Gender exploration really is for everyone. Every single person benefits. There's no one who doesn't benefit from it. And gender exploration doesn't mean that you transition. It means that you learn even more how to be authentic in who you are and how to present that self to the world in a way that feels resonant to you. So I hope that this book is one offering toward more and more folks understanding that piece of it as well.
Yes, definitely. And I'm curious if you're going to be doing like any public events or any book tours, or if there's anything you'd like to share about this process that feels important to name now that it's like so close to it coming out into the world.
Yeah, it's very limited on events for this book right now. But I am doing a weekend in Portland with Sea Grape Apothecary, and I'm doing a group ritual there, which is a name and pronoun release ritual, which is going to be so gorgeous. And then I'm also doing a book release party at Sea Grape Apothecary. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, that sounds so lovely. And if you have that information, I would love to include that in the description of this video or in the notes of the podcast. And I'm curious, what are some ways that folks can connect with you and kind of learn more about you? I know, as you said, you have evergreen information out there. And also, if folks want to connect with you to work with you one-on-one.
Absolutely. So my website is thegenderdoula.com. And I'm on Instagram at @thegenderdoula. I think the best thing that you can do is get on my mailing list. I might be a little biased, but I do have the Ask the Gender Doula column that comes out monthly, which is by far the most popular thing that I do, I think, on that list, because it is, people ask very robust, tender, deep questions and I give very robust, tender, deep answers. And so it is kind of a way to get a taste of the support and the care that I hold people with when we work together one-on-one. I think I have a wait list for my one-on-one work, but folks are welcome to email me and get on that wait list, and I can give them an estimate for when we could potentially do an intake and start that process. And like, as I said, I'm currently training the first ever certified group of gender doulas, which is really exciting. So I'm hoping to have students that I can point people to in the near future. It's a year-long training, so it'll be a minute, but I'm really excited about it still.
I'm so happy to know that you are training a whole new generation of folks to come out and support the community. And I really am someone who firmly believes that Gaia, the divine, the universe is constantly gifting us more and more trans people. And so I'm just imagining that there are so many folks who are going to benefit from the work that you're doing and from this book that you're releasing out into the world. And I'm really, really grateful to you for your time and for coming onto Your Art is a Spell. This book is such a potent spell and has so much magic behind it. And I cannot wait to read it, and I cannot wait to share about it with all the wonderful folks that are connected to this web.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to talk to you. And I just appreciate your support so much. This book means a lot to me, and it's so beautiful to hear it reflected through you.
Thank you. One of the things I'm really sitting with after that incredible conversation with Eli is just how different his vision is for the trans experience. Normally, we hear in the mainstream media so much about dysphoria, the medicalization of the trans experience, how much it is about either suffering or even being in relation to cisness. And I really hear that for Eli, transness is about creativity. It's a generative space for us to tune into our desire, what we are wanting to be or become. This is such a different, more affirming narrative that really expands the vision, the imagination for those of us who are exploring gender, who are curious about gender, who would like some support or help with gender. One of the things that I didn't really name during this conversation, but I ended up speaking with Eli shortly after we stopped recording, was how grateful I feel to be a licensed psychotherapist that is able to work with folks that are gender nonconforming, gender expansive, and that need letters of support, as well as need a space to connect with someone who understands the complexity of gender and how many of us do not fit in to the normative cis binary that's been created for us to force ourselves into, and that many of us could use a space to really get clear on what feels good and affirming, energizing, on where our desire lies and what our desire is sharing with us about who we are and who we are becoming. Now, with all that said, I want to encourage you to get a copy of this book, connect with Eli. Their posts on Instagram are such a deep and profound resource. I see them as medicine, and I want to invite you to go and connect with him there, as well as his newsletter. And I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast or to watch this video on YouTube. Your support allows us to continue to do the work here. And I want to invite you, if you are listening to Your Art is a Spell, to join us over on Patreon. It is free to sign up, and you also have the option of becoming a paid member to support this ongoing project. Now, if you're interested in signing up for my newsletter, you can go to mutant-magic.com and subscribe there for free to become a part of my own newsletter, where I share updates. I send out behind the scenes information, and I share ways that we can work together. Now, one of the last things that I shared in my last video at the end of the video as a little Easter egg was that I have officially started working with people within the realm of creative consulting. I've been doing it for some time because I've had countless people reach out to me asking for this type of support, and I've decided to officially make it an offering. You can go to my website to find out more information about that. My artist website is edgarfabianfrias.org, or you can also go to yourartisaspell.com, and you will see a link there under offerings to get more information about art consulting. If you've made it all the way to the end of this episode, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to remind you that your art is a spell and it will change your life and the world around us. Thank you so much for listening to Your Art is a Spell. Please support Your Art is a Spell by playing with the algorithm. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share this episode with a friend, leave a comment, leave us a review. All of those things help expand our web of influence and connect with other like-minded witches and weirdos, mutants and freaks, queer and trans babes. We're all here to support each other, and I'm making this podcast to connect us all and to also offer information that I wish I had known at the beginning of my own career as a multi-passionate artist. Sending much love to all of you through this spell of a podcast. See you next week.